Well, it's a new year, January 3rd, and many of you are making your plans for the year and setting agendas and things you want to accomplish throughout the year, and the CFA journey might be one on that checklist. For about 100,000 people a year, coming in to level 1 is brand new for them. So they have their first step into what's going to be a 3-exam journey. So we're gonna talk a little bit about your expectations on that. First, let's look at some timelines on the screen. This video is really high level. There's not a lot of strategy in this video. It's more high level. It's a higher level way of thinking about what you have in front of you and putting your mind in the right mindset and in the right place to do what needs to be done here. Because the CFA exams, and I'll talk about this on the next screen, but if you look at the failure rates, 43% pass level 1. That's 57% fail, and that failure rate is the people who write. There's another 15% who don't even show up. So of the ones that write, the 85% that write, 57% of them don't make it. Same with level 2, roughly about 55, 56%, but at level 3, the pass rate is in the 50s, 56, 57%, because you've learned your lesson by level 3. But we'll look at why the pass rates are so low for the first couple levels. Here is just, I'm really just talking about the February exam window and the May exam window. There's also a March exam window if you couldn't schedule something for February in your region. March would have opened up. You might have been able to get something for March, but let's just really look at February and May. In February, only level 1 is writing, and it's the exam windows February 16th to March 1st. I think that might have expanded, and then again, it falls into March as well. All the way to February 15th is 43 days. That's to the day before the exam window starts. So if you're 5 days into the exam window, you can add 5 days on to 43. You can do the math on that, I'm sure. Less 28 days for review. You got 15 days. So for those of you who are scheduled to write for February, the vast majority of you were probably scheduled to write in December anyways, and your center got canceled. So it's not like you're starting from scratch, but keep in mind, it's as real as it gets now. There is, I think, an extremely low probability that one of these exam centers will be canceled simply because they can accommodate all of the requirements of social distancing, etc. So it's more, I'd say more than 95% likely whatever test center you're in, that it's going to happen. So eye on the prize, right? You've got about 6 weeks before the exam window begins. And of course, if you're, a week into that, well, then you've got 7 weeks, right? If you're level 1 and you're scheduled for May, it may sound like a long time away. We're in the same year now, 2021, right? It's not December where you go, well, it's 2020. And the exam is until 2021. It sounds so long away. Well, we can't do that anymore. 134 days. Less 28 days for review is 106 days. That's 15 weeks for May. 57 readings. 15 weeks. That's roughly about 4 readings per week. And I've said this in a number of other videos. You cannot learn in a hurry. Your brain has a speed limit, and you have to go at that speed limit, or you're just wasting your time because you're not going to understand most of what you're going through anyways. Your best learning is running 60, 70, 80% of your speed limit, whatever cognitive speed limit you have. So at this point, it's not a matter of saying, I need to race through 4 readings a week. It's a matter of saying, I need to expand my calendar throughout the week to fit in enough time to get through 4 readings. So it's not, I have 6 hours a week and I got to get 4 readings done. No. You have to get through 4 readings. How many hours are you going to need? You're going to have to sacrifice on some things. For level 2 and level 3, your window starts May 25th. Level 1 is 18 to the 24. Level 2 and 3 is 25th to June 1st. That's 141 days. You've got an extra an extra 7 days in there. Take off 28 days for level 2. You got 113 days. That's 16 weeks before you hit the review period. 48 readings, 16 weeks. That's 3 per week. The work at level 2 is a lot more cognitively intensive and a lot more quantitatively driven than it is at level 1. So the readings there are more challenging readings than at level 1. Not that every reading is more challenging, but of the challenging readings, there's more of them at level 2 than at level 1. And most of the other readings tend to be longer and a lot more quantitatively driven because it's a valuation level. Level 1 is introducing you to some research tools and the asset classes. Level 2, a few research tools there, quantitative analysis, economics, some FRA, but you go through the asset classes and it's valuation of the assets. So you're going to need sufficient time for that because arithmetic and math, you do not read that. You actually have to work it. You have to do it. That's the only way to learn that kind of stuff. All right, so again, those hours per week are going to have to expand, and there's no point racing from reading to reading to reading. If you're not absorbing anything, you have to stay under your speed limit. Level 3, I took off another 7 days for review, 35 days for review, so you have 106 days. Reason is, level 3 has the AM exam, and it's a different type of exam, and you really need a lot of practice with the structured response questions to sort of get it straight how to answer that so you don't run out of time. So you want to give yourself that one extra week so that you can improve on your strategy during that period of time. 106 days, 15 weeks. Now, there are only 36 readings. There's actually 38. Actually, you could say there are 33 readings, really, because you've seen the code and standards at level 1 and level 2. Well, it's there at level 3 again. You've already seen it. That should really be a review for you. There are 35 more readings with new content, and then there are 2 readings that are case studies. I don't see them as being very testable. They're sort of like a case study that covers a whole bunch of readings all in one case study that you follow along through this case study. They're mostly narrative. I recommend reading them, but I don't know that there's any real learning that has to be done. You just get to see how everything fits together. So the real learning happens in 35 readings. I'm assuming ethics is not going to be a deal for you. 15 weeks, 35 readings. You're a little over 2 per week. Now, some of the readings in level 3 are long. Fixed income is tough. One of the readings in there is about 100 pages long. It's on yield curve strategies. It is considered across the 3 levels one of the most challenging readings to get through. There's a lot, I think 80 exhibits that you have to get through, and you do have to work through those exhibits. So, may sounds like a long time away, but when you break it down into what you have to do per week, the heavy lifting that you have to do per week, suddenly it's not a lot of time anymore. So there we go. That brings you to May. August is a little too far away to talk about. You've got, if you're thinking of August and November, just keep adding 90 days onto each of the numbers here, and that's where you are, but I'll have more to say about that. Let's get our mind in the right place for this. We look at these failure rates, and when I look at the content, let's just take quant at level 1, for example. At an undergraduate level, if you took a statistics course at an undergraduate level, there are more readings. It would be more intense than the 6 readings that are given to you at level 1. So those 6 readings really represent maybe 40 or 50% of what a full semester course would be. And the readings you have for quant are not as rigorous as they would be at a university level, at an undergraduate level. For example, there's one reading on probability concepts where you're introduced to probability, but there's no calculus. If this were an undergrad course and there was a probability in there, you would be doing integration. There would be calculus. That's just part of a probability course. So even if it's a chapter or 2, 1 or 2 weeks on probability, you would be doing integration. That doesn't happen at level 1. The math is not complex. So it's just the tools that you're really using. So it's It's not as rigorous as a university course, and each section at level 1 is about half a university course. So if you look at the 10 sections, it's really about 5. If you were going to cram them all into, complementary university courses, you'd get about 5 out of that. 5 that are not as rigorous, they're less rigorous. So what's the deal? Why is the failure rate so high if it's not as rigorous as an undergrad course, and it's really the equivalent of 1 semester? And look, we've all been through university. You've been through university. You get A's, B's, C's. Why is the failure? You don't see 57% of people failing out of undergrad. So what's the big deal? Why the problem? Well, there are 3 problems, and we'll look at that on the next screen. Okay, here's the outcome I'd like to explain here, at least giving you my best explanation of this outcome, having been in the university system for so many years. A high failure rate and a low completion rate. Now, we see this in undergrad as well. If you look at the size of first-year classes and the size of fourth-year classes, they're much smaller. That universities tend to graduate a small fraction, 40-50% of those who actually begin year 1. Some students decide this is not for me. They switch their major, they switch to another department, into another school. But across all universities, if you look at how many people graduate each year versus how many people are incoming each year, a lot get lost through the system. They never complete. There are some schools who are very conscious of this. They have higher completion rates because they will not accept somebody in first year unless they see a high probability for completing. As you go from undergrad to graduate programs, that becomes a big deal. Is they do assess your ability to actually complete the program, and especially at a PhD level, because it's a lot of self-study. It's self-directed. They only want to bring in people they know will complete. CFAI has no requirement like that. They take no pains to determine whether or not you have a high probability of completing the course. Low completion rate. How do we get there? We know high failure rate. We can look at that. Level 1's failure rate is usually 55 to 57%. You have pass rates anywhere from 42 to 45%. Same with level 2, a little bit higher, a point or 2 higher for level 2, and then level 3. The pass rate's more like 55 to 57%, so the failure rate is sort of flipped around. Level 1, the failure rate is 57%. Level 3, the pass rate is 57%. The failure is only low 40s. Mostly because if you've made it to level 3, you have the ability to complete level 3. Not only that, you've learned from your lessons for level 1 and 2, and you're not going to make that mistake again. Yet, a little over 40% still make the mistake. And again, at level 3, the same thing at level 1. If we take any of the readings at level 3, so let's take the readings on fixed income or even equity portfolio management. A textbook treatment of fixed income portfolio management is far more rigorous, far more mathematically rigorous than you're going to get in the 4 readings at level 3. So it is an easier bar, an easier hurdle than you would get in an undergrad class. So what's the deal? So I shouldn't say an undergrad class. That's the content there is something more that you would see at a graduate level as opposed to an undergraduate level, but again, far more rigorous. Depending on where you are, you might even see it in the 4th year course. I've seen some of those concepts in the 4th year course, especially immunization. You've seen that. Anyways, I'm getting distracted here. Low completion rate. Every year about not counting repeats or anything, every year about 100,000, anywhere from 80 to 100,000 people come into the system at level 1. So over the last 20 years, it would not be unreasonable to say that 1.7 to 2 million people have entered into the system in the last 20 years. Now, CFA designation has been around longer than that. Yet there are only 170,000 charter holders worldwide. That's the completion rate. So many people begin. Why do so few people actually make it through to the end? It would seem to me that if you begin something and you decide it's not for you, off you go. But to have that many decide it's not for them, that doesn't ring true to me. Something is going on there. And here are the big things right here, 1, 2, and 3. This is self-study. It is, and if there's anybody out there who's ever taught in a university, you'll recognize this right away. Every semester you can hold independent study. Students can approach you and say, I would like to pursue an independent study under your guidance, so that they'd register as an independent study course, and then they would discuss with you what their curriculum would look like and what their deliverable is. Usually it's a big paper or a series of papers that they would deliver. Those you have to pick and choose your student very carefully, because it is, I'd say, 10 or 15% of all the students you have are capable of an independent study, meaning they are capable of policing themselves and staying on schedule, because there is no schedule, there is no class. It is self-directed study. It's not for everyone. So there are some students that may say, look, I'd like to do an independent study this summer to knock off a credit, and you know they're not going to complete it. You know they're going to negotiate for extra time. You know they're going to hand in garbage at the end, and you're going to be put in the uncomfortable position of having to fail them and then them begging for the grade. So usually you don't touch that. Self-study is a big deal. Self-study is a big problem. So the last year that we've had with COVID and all these universities moving their classes online, where you then work at home, it is tantamount to self-study. I think that this past year, most universities probably have either had to lower the rigor of the courses that they've had because the failure rate would be too high, or live with a higher failure rate. But that's the big deal with level 1, 2, and 3 is you're moving from an institution that you were at that had structure. You had classes every week, you had deliverables, you had something keeping you honest, you had a schedule, you could see exactly where you were in the schedule, you knew how many readings you were behind, you had something. Here you don't. You register for level 1, it's going to happen in 6 months, here's your 57 readings, we'll see you in 6 months. What do you do if you were not very good at putting structure into your life? And we'll look at some solutions down here. That's the biggest one. If you ask anybody who fails at level 1, very few will say it was way too hard. Well, some people will, but very few. What you're going to hear more often than not is, I underestimated the amount of time that was necessary. So the importance of putting structure into your life when you're doing something that is self-study and self-directed like this. Number 2, it's big, and there's only one assessment. Everything is on that one assessment. In an undergrad course, 3 weeks in, and usually about 6 weeks in, there are some deliverables, because there's a date where you can elect to drop a class without having a grade assigned. And depending on where you are, at least 30 to 40% of your grade must be in before that drop date, so that you can make an informed decision about what your progress is going to be like in the course. So if you're falling behind in those first 2 assessments, you could say, look, I'm not going to run for the grade. I'm going to back out so it doesn't show up on my transcript. Well, there are no deliverables along the way. There's no case study, there's no midterm, there's no series of quizzes along the way. So it's not as if every so often you have to play catch up and say, I'm 3 readings behind, I need the next 2 nights to get ready for the midterm and get these 3 readings in. There's nothing. So suddenly you find yourself 6 weeks out from the exam and you're 15, 16 readings behind, or 20 readings behind. And well, then that becomes a bit of an issue, right? You can't learn in a hurry. Maybe you can find the time to catch up on 3 readings from a particular course over the course of a week, but there are 58 readings, 57 readings, I think, at level 1. It changes year to year, and sometimes I can't remember the exact numbers. 57, I believe. Not only that, you pretty much know going into the final exam what score you're sitting on. So it sets an expectation for how hard you have to prepare for that final exam. You can go into a final exam and say, listen, if I get a 60% on the final exam, I still get a B plus. I'm good with that. Maybe you make that negotiation with yourself. But then you pretty much know how it's going to go for you. Here you don't. You have no idea. Now, here's the thing. If you take the questions on this exam, if I took the questions off the exam and I had an undergrad course in, let's say, quantitative analysis, and we covered level 1, and I put those questions in as the exam questions, that would never pass in a university. Those questions are not rigorous enough. The content was not rigorous enough. That would never fly. So the content is lighter than you would get at an undergrad program. The questions are easier. It shouldn't be a failure rate that high. But when you think about self-study and you think about it all being on one exam and there was nothing along the way to keep you honest, nothing along the way that gives you feedback that says, wait a minute here, this isn't really working out for me. I can tell my grades right now aren't where I want them to be. That gives you that feedback so that you can modify your behavior. There's nothing here to modify. There's no feedback loop that says you've got this, or whoa, you're way off on this. Also, number 3, there's no entrance grade requirement. Anybody that has an undergrad degree or is in their final year of university, regardless of what university you went to, all the way from the hardest ones to get in with the most rigorous content to what are called extremely accessible universities, where the course content isn't really university level. It's more like a college, but they've called themselves a four-year college, or you get a BBA or a bachelor's degree. But you really weren't pushed. Almost everybody gets an A or a B, even just for showing up, right? Well, CFAI makes no distinction in what your grade was, what your performance was in coming in. So you have all the way from A students right down to D students that take it. And with the C to D students, I find that there are 2 types of students at that level. There are students, and this is the smaller group of them, who they try their best, but they're just not going to get it. And because there isn't that threshold that they have to prove that they have the capability for, they're free to take it, which isn't always in the best interest of the candidate, because in my mind there should be saying, listen, if you're not this tall, you can't get on this ride, and that's just to protect the person. If you can't score above a certain amount in your undergraduate program, this isn't going to work out very well for you. That's one group. I think that's the smaller group. The bigger group are those that could have done it, but just didn't. They never showed up. They never rose to the occasion. My thinking is they're not CFA candidates because the CFA program is voluntary. You don't have to take it. Well, these people never showed up anyways. They're not going to show up. They're not suddenly going to say, I'm going to take this program. They avoided work. They didn't like work. They dialed it in or phoned it in whenever they could. That's why they have a C, especially at third-tier universities. I don't know that that's a big enough problem at the CFA level, because again, you'd need the motivation to sign up. And if you're getting a C because you're not trying, you lack the motivation anyways, I doubt you're even thinking of anything more than, I got my piece of paper, I don't have a job, I'm heading to Starbucks. Lots of degree holders at Starbucks, by the way. I'd say number 1 and 2 are your big issues. These are the big devils that you have to deal with, and especially number 1, I think, is your biggest enemy, is its self-study. Starting this year, there's a bigger problem. It used to be that you could fail level 1, try again, 3 times now. After your 3rd attempt, it's over. So it's even more critical now that you get it right. Because if you fail the first time, well, you got 2 more. You fail the 2nd time, you got pressure. That's a lot of pressure going into an exam. You've failed twice, now you're going into your 3rd time. If you fail this one, that's the end of the line. It's over. So just be aware that there is now, I think, other than just a financial cost to failure, there is now a real cost to failure. And I think that is we could, sort of say that that's one issue with CFAI as well. In the past, if I could take the exam again and again and again until I pass, I could do it till I get lucky. My only cost to failure is my financial cost, because they don't actually publish anything about how many times I took the exam. Once I have the 3 letters, I'm just as good as somebody else who has the 3 letters who passed it 1, 2, 3. Nobody knows, because that's never published. Grades are never published. So once you get the 3 letters, from their perspective, everyone's equal in that respect. So there was really no cost, no personal cost in that sense to failure, just some financial cost. Well, now there's a cost to failure. You fail any level, you have 3 attempts at any level. If you fail it, that's it. It's over. Which I think makes a lot of sense, because if you tried 3 times and you didn't make it, there's a signal right there that, you know what, this is not for you. It sucks if that happens at level 3. But my thinking, it's probably going to happen more often at level 1. Don't be that person. All right, let's see what we can do about that. Number 1, structure. You can't do this without structure. If you don't have a plan, almost any strategy, you'll follow almost any strategy. It's sort of like if you don't know where you're going, any path will get you there, right? You have to know where you're going. You have to put some structure into what you're doing. And structure means that you have to determine how many hours a week you're going to put into this. You're going to have to schedule those hours, and you're going to have to stick to it. In university, if you don't stick to your schedule, there are penalties. You're late on your assignment, you lose 10 or 15% of your grade, or it's just not graded. You put off studying till the night before, you ended up with a 62 on the exam. There are real penalties. There's downside to underperforming. When you are self-studying, even if you set structure, there's no one to enforce it, only you. And it's easy to blow it off. I don't feel like it. And we'll talk about that when we get to attitude, the I don't feel like it part. But it's easy to blow off. You know what? It's 6 months away. I've got plenty of runway. If I don't do it today, I can do it tomorrow. I'll double up tomorrow. I'll just add half an hour to each session. You never will. You won't. Make a plan and stick with it. Make it rigid. Block everything off. And it is non-negotiable time even for you. If you have a significant other, if you're living in a household with other people, make them force them, or make them force you to stick to your schedule, and even negotiate a penalty. Say, listen, if I don't do it during this time, here's a penalty that I would have to pay. So that there is some downside to not doing it. You have to put in that structure. Some people can work well in an unstructured environment and build structure themselves. A lot of people can't, because undergraduate didn't teach you a lot of structure, depending on where you went. You had these structured times, it's structured deliverables, when it's due. Everything was laid out for you. When you got your syllabus on your first day, you could see exactly when everything was due and exactly all the readings and what week it was. You've got to do that yourself. The Learning Ecosystem, CFAI's website, has a good planner. On our website, we have a good planner, a very detailed planner, which allows you to weight each reading based on difficulty, and it'll expand and contract your schedule based on how difficult you think it is. And as you're recording your time, it'll recognize when you're using less time or more time, and it'll expand the amount of hours that you need to put in for you. That's free for everyone out here. Or anyone out there that needs to use a more advanced planner. That's free, by the way. And when I get down to resources, I'll talk a little bit more about what else is free. Attitude. This is a big one. I have to study. I see that a lot, or I have seen that a lot with students. I gotta get this assignment done. I gotta study. I gotta do this. You don't gotta do it. You get to do it. There should be this eagerness to say, I can't wait to learn what's in that next reading. I can't get enough of this. You got to change your attitude. If your attitude is always, I got to get this done, I got to get this done, stop. What are you doing? What are you doing that's so unpleasant that you have to force yourself to get it done? You know, when people in January make their resolutions for the year, if you have ever gone to a gym, you're going to find that for the first 1 or 2 weeks, the gym is packed with everybody who's made the resolutions. You're not going to see it now because of COVID, but typically it is packed. And by the 3rd week, 4th week of January, it's over. Because the people that sign up and go to the gym in their 2nd week, they're like, I got to go to the gym. It's like, talk to anyone who's addicted. Talk to anyone where that's a normal part of their schedule, and they never say, I got to go to the gym. It's always, I get to go to the gym. I get to go and do this and do that. It is addicting. Get addicted. Change your attitude. If you've been doing this for 3-4 months and you're still saying, I gotta get it doesn't get any better. You know, it's not as if you're going to finish these 3 levels and suddenly life is going to be so much different. This is the whole field. This is the whole profession. It's a whole life of, I got to do this, I got to do that. You are not going to have fun at all. So if you can't change your attitude, if your attitude really is, if you really sit down and say to yourself, you know what? I don't enjoy it. I do see it as something I got to get through. Then stop. Because you're never ever going to be good at this, because you're never actually going to develop the passion that's needed. Change your attitude. You get to learn what's in the next reading. You get to learn at level 1 about derivatives. Powerful contracts. They are, I think, some of the most underrated securities that you can use. Well, they're not really securities, but contracts that you can use. Powerful for strategies. You get to learn about fixed income, and maybe you don't understand the fixed income market, but it demystifies everything. You get to understand how economies work at a very high level. You get to understand how firms make decisions about when they issue debt, when they issue equity, when they raise their dividend. You get to learn all of this stuff. The keys to the kingdom, because if you know this stuff and you have some experience behind you, the market is a money printing machine for you. If you want to see how some of this stuff is applied, if you want inspiration, my whole applied series is free. I think there's 40 or 45 videos. What I do in the applied series is I take actual content off the page and say, you should have read this. Now let's apply it. How do we turn this into something that's profitable? Get addicted. Get inspired. Look at this as something you get to do. My God, I get to learn about alternative investments. I've heard so much about it. What is it really? I get to learn this. Right? Get the right attitude. With the right attitude, you got motivation. Structure becomes less important because you will just show up. Ask anybody who goes to the gym 4, 5, 6 times a week when they find time, and that's not even a quote. What do you mean find time? Like it doesn't even occur to them that they have to schedule time. They just go. It's just they get pulled there, and if they're not there for 2 or 3 days, they feel it, and you got to get back. You can't wait to get back. So the mind is a muscle, and the pages of CFAI are your gym. Different sets, different muscle groups. When you go to the gym, you got different categories in level 1. Fixed income today, equity tomorrow, derivatives the next day, alternative investments, and you're doing your reps and your sets. Think about it that way. It's a cognitive gym that you get to work out in every single day. And much like going to the gym, the more you push yourself, the stronger you get. Same thing cognitively. The more you push yourself, the stronger you get. The more clarity you have. So let's work on the attitude. You want to work on something this year? Work on that. Find passion in this. And if you've given it your best and you can't find passion, that's a conclusion. That's still a valid conclusion. This is not for you. It's okay. It's not for you. Feedback. like I said, in undergrad, you have feedback all the time. You have your results from your case study, the results from your quiz. Maybe you had to do a presentation. You had a midterm. You're always getting feedback on where you stand so that you can adjust your effort level to target a certain grade. You could do the same thing. Question banks and a chapter questions, but you got to give it an honest effort. There's no point in doing a quiz and trying, looking at the answers or faking your way through and thinking that, well, I got 8 out of 10. Yeah, but you had to refer to the book quite a lot. If you want feedback every so often, if you've done quant, say, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pretend I have a midterm this Saturday in quant, and I'm going to study for this midterm. And then you generate a quiz, and you can generate 50 questions in that quiz or 40 questions in that quiz. I think ours limits at 25, sorry. So you generate a quiz of 25, but instead of picking any reading, just select quant, and it'll generate 25 questions for you. Do two or three of those. If you do 2 of them, there's 50 questions. That's good feedback right there. But pretend you have a midterm. Actually study for that midterm. Create the situation in which you have a midterm. That's the only way you're going to get honest feedback. You got to be honest. You got to do it honestly, right? And resources. It's not just the pages that you have. There's plenty of resources to use, and I would use the resources. Some of you may say, I've always learned on my own. I know how to learn on my own. Just give me the book and I'm all set. Well, some of those readings aren't teaching readings. They're telling readings. They're compiled to tell you something so that if you've never seen it before, some of these readings take no pains in teaching you the stuff. They only tell you what they feel you should already know. They're telling readings, not teaching readings. Reddit. Listen, any question you have, there's a CFA forum on Reddit. Any question you have, I guarantee you it has been asked, or some form of it has been asked on Reddit and answered many times. All the answers are there. You're going through a page, you can't quite figure something out, go to Reddit. It's right there. Go to Reddit. Don't spend 3 hours. Don't run to Reddit and ask every question you have the moment it pops in your head. You got to work through it. And on the final screen, there's one more screen after this. On the final screen, I'm going to talk about some learning theory and hopefully describe to you about that feeling of frustration you get when you learn. That's necessary. Don't avoid the frustration. It is necessary. And that's on the next screen. But, think it through for a while. But if you're really stuck, hit Reddit. It's right there. When I talk about resources, I'm going to mostly talk about free resources that you have available to you. There are always providers that are out there. Some good, some not so good. That's for you to discover. Talk to your friends, talk to other people. On Reddit, there are plenty of reviews on Reddit, so you can determine there. I am a provider myself, but this video is more about helping you with information content than trying to sell you something. If you use me, great. I'm happy. If not, as long as you're availing yourself of the resources that are out there. Reddit, YouTube. There's a lot of good stuff on YouTube. My whole level 1 from 2017 is on YouTube for free. And there are others that I've seen on YouTube. Some are good, some not so good, some not in English. So, if you're a native English speaker, some of them aren't going to help you out very much. And they're sort of all over the place. So sometimes you can piece together enough for a reading. Sometimes you can't. Plenty of resources for level 1, less so for level 2, almost nothing on YouTube for level 3, but still lots on Reddit. The Candidate Resource Center, the learning ecosystem. You've got a whole question bank. I don't know how many questions are there, 1,100, 1,200 questions in the learning ecosystem, combined with, I think, about 2,000 end of chapter questions at level 1, and 3 mock exams. So there's lots of resources available for you to use. It gets thinner at level 2, and at level 3, it gets harder to find these free resources. So providers become more important as you go along. This is the big deal here, eh? Only 3 attempts per level. So if you're going to go it alone, that's fine. If you don't make it your first attempt, I would strongly recommend that you align yourself with a provider, because they can enlighten you and save you a lot more time for you trying to figure out what something means. You could just listen to a video for what it means. I don't know about the other providers if they offer the same features. I imagine everybody must, but under the video there's a comment section where you can then clarify. Structure, attitude, those are the two big ones. Design some feedback assessments for yourself. Pretend that you have a midterm and create a midterm, and avail yourself of the resources. You know, if you're taking a long journey, you're going to use a map, right? You're going to ask people, well, which way do I go? Do I go this way or that way? Same thing. Avail yourself of the free resources. The next screen, I'm going to talk about the process of learning, 4 stages of learning, and how you feel during those particular 4 stages. And it's really important that you listen to this. It has a good strategy in there of how to pace yourself through the reading so that you can learn what your speed limit is. And you may be, I think, if you've gone through the readings a few times, if you haven't learned how to build knowledge, learning is done in layers. You never just take one thing and you go through it linearly and then you exit saying, aha, I know it now. It's built in layers. So it gives you a strategy for how to do something in 2 layers. But it may help clear up a lot of confusion you have over that level of frustration you get. And just to give you some insight into that, I'm going to use the analogy of going to the gym. I'm losing the light here, so I gotta work quickly here. When you go to the gym, your goal is to tear down your muscle, and you tear it down by pushing yourself to the limit of your capability. And you usually, if you're lifting weight, you'll usually have a spotter, and that spotter is there to help you with that last rep. The moment you start to fail, if you're benching, the moment you start to fail and start coming back down, that's where the pickup is. The spotter is not there to spot every single rep you have, because now you're not pushing to the edge of your ability. And it's the same with learning. If you're learning and you're saying, what's this, what's that, what's this, what's that, and you're not pushing yourself to the limit of your ability, if you're getting an answer for every single question, it's like a spotter helping you lift every rep. You're not going to get to the limit of your capability. To build strength, you have to push yourself to the limits of your capability. To build cognitive strength, you have to do the same thing. You have to push yourself to the limit of your cognitive ability. When you're lifting weight, you feel that burn in your muscle. It hurts, right? You feel, it's a burn. That's a good burn because you know you're doing well. When you're learning and you feel frustration, that's the burn. When you're frustrated, that's where you're learning. You're at the limit of your ability. You pull back from that, you give it a couple of days, you come back to that exercise again, that cognitive exercise, you'll find that you can go further. That's what I mean by layers. Anyways, watch that next one, and that's it. In this short video, I'm going to introduce you to a couple of learning theories that may help illuminate why sometimes you feel the way you do when you're learning something new. Why sometimes things go, that's what that is, and at other times you think, okay, I'm entirely confused, I don't get anything, and I'm frustrated. And you may think that you're not making progress. But that feeling of frustration is actually progress. So I'm going to explain that with a couple of learning theories. The first one talks about the 4 stages of learning. And I'm going to draw a timeline to help out here. And here you are, we'll put you at time point 1, which is unconscious incompetence. At this point, what that really means is, if you're at the beginning of a reading and I said, do you have any questions about this reading? Well, you don't know. How would you know what questions you have until you start the reading? In other words, you're unaware of what you do not know. There are things that you're not going to know as you go through the reading that you're going to look at and say, well, okay, I have a question here, I have a question there. But up front, you don't know what those questions are. All it means is that you are unaware of what you do not know. So let's put stage 2 here. And how do we get from stage 1 to stage 2. And I get this question a lot. What's the process? What do I go through? What is the order of things that I do? Well, you're going to introduce yourself to the knowledge, which means it may involve reading the reading itself. You may not really like the way the reading is written and you prefer to watch the video. That's fine. When I do the videos, as you'll see when you get to them, I cover every LOS. I cover all the things you need to know, and I don't just tell you, I explain. I deeply explain. When we get to Bloom's taxonomy, I'll explain that a little bit more. And this is really your first pass. Oh yes, multiple passes. This is your first pass, and you'll get to a level of conscious incompetence, and you may have a level of frustration with you as well. Here is where you now know what you do not know. So here you couldn't answer any my question about do you have any questions. Here if I asked you, do you have any questions, you would say, yes, I do. Well, that's progress. Even though you don't know some things, you are now aware of those things. That in itself is progress. So if you get through a reading and you have a list of 10 questions that you don't know the answers to, 10 things that are still confusing and you feel a little frustrated, that's because you moved from stage 1 to stage 2. You are now aware of what you do not know. Beautiful. The motivation sometimes is to ask a lot of questions here. And I'm going to suggest that that is actually the wrong thing to do. Because you really should discover as many of the answers on your own as possible, because that's how you internalize that knowledge. That's how you own it. If you, at every point where you don't understand something, say, well, what is this? What is that? What's this over here? What's that over there? And somebody is giving you an answer at each stage along the way, you're not really working for those answers. You don't even know if they would be correct answers because you're willing to accept it. So you really have to come to your own conclusion. So what I recommend is when you're doing your first pass, have a notepad beside you and jot down your questions. Just write them down. Resist the urge to put them in the comment boxes under the videos for a couple of reasons. Number one, as you're at some point in the video, this is quite common, a few minutes later your question may be answered. Or a little while later, something may click where you go, aha, and then you can cross something off your list. How do we get from conscious incompetence to conscious competence? And I'll put a 3 over here because that is the journey that we'll be taking. This is where you actually have to do a little bit of work. You go to the Q bank at this point in time, or you use the end of chapter questions. And you work through it. You don't have to know the answer, you just have to start working towards it. And it's okay to score low in the Q bank. It's okay to score low in the end of chapter questions because you're still forming your knowledge. And that is the point of Q bank questions and end of chapter questions. They are called formative assessment. And formative assessment is there not really to test you, but to help you learn. When you get to mock exams, those are called summative assessments. And summative assessments are there to test you. They're not there to help you learn anymore. They're there to plainly test you directly. So you will get questions in the question bank and the end of chapter question that you would never see on an exam because it's meant to help you learn something, and some component of what you're learning is the highly testable point. But to get that component, to truly see that component, sometimes you have to work a bigger problem that you wouldn't expect to see anywhere else. So Q-Bank, end of chapter questions, review is extremely powerful. If you think about how you learn something and how you forget something, and let's say here's learning, you'll learn very quickly, there's 100% of what you know. It may not be 100% of what you need to know, but there's 100% of what you know. If you do not revisit it, here's what happens. It decays. So the very next day, as it's decaying, you'll do a 10 or 15 minute review, and it does this. Your knowledge bumps back up again. Then you could space that out by a week, and as it drips down and you review, and you could space it out every 3 weeks after. So you do a reading next day, 7 days, and every 21 days. 7 days, 21 days, and you can keep your knowledge level higher. And these reviews over here, these are 5 to 10 minutes. Just 5 to 10 minute reviews of the review notes. Most of the review videos are short enough, 10 or 15 minutes, that if you're watching them at 1.5 times speed, you can get through them fairly quickly. So you'll do review videos, and this is your second pass as well. A second pass of the reading. Don't discount the power of the second pass. Most people would say, but I don't have the time for that. Listen, it's better to go into the exam knowing 80% or 70% of the content really, really well, and the rest somewhat. You don't have to know 100% deeply. As long as you have the big sections down, you know those deeply enough, it's okay sometimes to let other things go and just aim for 50% on those sections. The second pass, why is that important? Well, let's say that I gave you a passage to read, and I said, read this and tell me if you have any questions. Well, you'll read it, and you may not pick up on certain nuances in the reading. And then I'll say, do you have any questions? You might say, not really. Now, try this. What if I asked you a question up front about that passage, and then you read that passage? Well, now you're reading for an answer. The answer will pop out at you, whereas before, nothing popped out at you because you had no questions in your mind. It's hard to do that over here before you start your first pass because unconscious incompetence, you are unaware of what you do not know. You only become aware of it over here. Now you're ready to really learn, and you'll hit to the level of conscious competence once you do your second pass. By the time you get here, you should know it. And there you go. Then you head to the next reading, and you'll find that the process is the same again. That first pass through the reading, that's just to get you to stage 2, just so that you are aware of what you do not know. You get to the end, you say, okay, great. I get most of it, but I don't get this, this, and this. Now it's time for your second pass. Your first pass might be reading. Your second pass might be video. Or your first pass might be video. Your second pass might be reading. You don't have to read and watch the video on your first pass, then on your second pass. You could pick one or the other. And what I would do, and trust me, this works, it's extremely powerful, is whatever your first pass is, have your notepad here and jot down all your questions so that when you do your second pass, whether it's the video or whether it's reading, you're going to be looking for the answers to these questions. You will be amazed at what jumps out at you. You will be amazed at how much more engaging the video is or the reading is when you're reading for an answer. What is this? Unconscious competence. This is called synthesis. This is the idea that 2 + 2 = 5. Synthesis is an emergent property in your brain. It is some new connection that you can make by knowing this body of knowledge and knowing this body of knowledge. Without something being said here or without something being said here, you can create another statement. You can combine these two and say something that is not said here or here. And you cannot decompose this thought into this body of knowledge or this body of knowledge. It is emergent to the two bodies of knowledge. And what this means is the more you know, because your learning starts to look like this. The more you know, the more you start to know, because you start building upon other things that you know as well. Let me see if I can give you an example of what an emergent property is. Let's take hydrogen, a compressible gas. Let's take oxygen. That is also a compressible gas. But when you combine it in the form of 2 hydrogens and an oxygen, you get an uncompressible liquid. Now, the uncompressibility and the liquid nature of it is not reducible to either the hydrogen or the oxygen. It emerges at the level of the whole, and you cannot decompose it to its parts. That's what this is. This emerges at the level of the whole. You cannot reduce it to its parts. So as you master quant, and then you move over and you master fixed income, and then you move over and you master derivatives, you'll stop and say, wait a minute here. Derivatives and quant, if I look at time value of money, I can do away with all the formulas in derivatives and just draw a timeline. This is nothing more than time value of money, isn't it? And you'll make that connection, and suddenly derivatives become super, super simple, because you'll read a problem and go, this is super simple now that I see it that way. You've come to see it in a way that you couldn't see it until you combined 2 separate thoughts. And then you can't decompose that to any one of the two topics. So this is where we hope to get you by the end of level 1. by the end of level 2 or level 3 that when you are doing your final review stage and you're consolidating across all the topics, suddenly things start to make connections for you and you see things that you didn't see before.